Activision Blizzard welcomes its new Microsoft overlords after a controversial back-and-forth battle. Is Dragonflight really done with patch 10.2? And congrats to the classic guilds who cleared ICC as if it was a long Mythic Plus dungeon. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, professional denial at your service. You can help the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing for more coverage, and catching me live on the Twitches. This week's 10.2 build continues the trend of giving us not a lot to go with other than the patches applying some of its finishing touches. At this point, we, and by that I mean I, can finally put to rest any last hopes of patch 10.2 launching on the 24th, as this week's build did not turn out to be a release candidate, but there's always next week. One controversial highlight to point out from this build is the Dreambound augment rune that's going to be available from vendors. It's double gated, first behind requiring Renown 18 with the Dream Wardens in order to get, meaning it's going to take a couple of weeks to get, but also it costs a whopping 100,000 gold. It's double that of previous runes. The immediate question is, why are the devs so out of touch? No, the immediate question is, why is it hella expensive? And well, this guess might baffle you, but big data probably shows that for the primary target market, the people who actually use these runes, they're probably rich. Why are the devs so out of touch? I do think it's worth discussing how raw gold farming has been in this expansion, seeing as how there was no mission table here for the first time since World of Draenor. It's easy enough for the individual player to see plenty of raw gold to collect right here on the Dragon Isles through world quests and dragon racing, not to mention the weekly chest that might offer some bonus gold. It's obviously not the same thing as switching from one mission table character to another, and I'm actually getting on a bit of a tangent. Previous to Dragonflight, we had a story that put our characters a little bit more front and center. We had borrowed power to make us feel special, a series of systems built around that, and, of course, offline progression. For all the criticism that Dragonflight gets, not a lot of folks bring up the offline progression or the mission table in their discourse, which might underline how forgettable of a feature that it turned out to be. But now that I'm putting a spotlight on it, here's the question for you folks. Do you miss the mission table? Whether it was for the gold or the rewards or that, feeling of offline progression, was it cool to have a thing to check into when you first log in, or are you still using the legacy tables? There's no right or wrong answers, I just want to hear your takes. Okay, so I mentioned the permanent augment rune. It made the news this week, not just for the price, but for the fact that it's in 10.2 at all, giving yet another signal that this patch might be Dragonflight's last major raid patch, and it's hard to deny. It all started when the WoW team was dodgy about declaring whether 10.2 would include the game's final major raid.
Is 10.2 the last major patch of Dragonflight?
Nothing new to announce there.
Since then, with the 10.2 PTR, we've seen the AOTC heroic mount, something that comes with the expansion's final major raid, and there's smaller signs like Dragonflight Pathfinder, which is kind of like Blizzard's way of saying, fine, whatever, go ahead and pause the game as much as you like. I said time and time again that WoW is nothing if not obvious, and the augment rune, it felt like the straw that broke the camel's back. Lots of folks are going through these stages and dealing with the very real possibility that Dragonflight is going to be narratively shorter, not unlike Shadowlands or World of Draenor with less story to tell. I'm seeing the conversations going around with all these bombastic conclusions and accusations like, OMG, Dragonflight was so poorly received they abandoned it mid-development to work on 11.0. All those staff exits, it means that so much content was cut. Well, Metzen returning is definitely the reason why Dragonflight's shorter, and we can go on with the conspiracy theories, and that's all those are. It's just theories based on assumptions, based on a few tiny facts. So let's leave some of that at the door. To be fair though, I like to keep an open mind. At this point though, based on what we're seeing on the PTR, anyone who thinks that there's going to be anything but a bonus fated season like Shadowlands after this one, well, I'll just say damn, I thought I was high on the copium. But with all that said, let's take a step back and ask ourselves if 10.2 really is the end of the Dragonflight story. Because we gotta be fair, when we look at this AOTC mount and the augment rune, the PTR is clearly following a pattern that we've been seeing since World of Draenor. There's more to it though. Data mining revealed what is pretty obviously another gladiator-style mount. It's a strong indicator that there's going to be a new PvP season. Knowing that, when we look at Dragonflight as a whole, we of course see these 0.5 and 0.7 patches, each of which bring the story forward bit by bit. To say that 10.2 is the end of the Dragonflight raids? Sure. The end of the Dragonflight story, though, that I think is a bit premature. There's a lot that can happen in a 0.5 and a 0.7 patch if they're part of the plan, and I assume there is. And then there's the possible repeat of a Fated Season, or aka it's a Season 4 of Shadowlands, which had us revisit the previous raids, along with a short but still impactful PvP and dungeon season. So let's take a little bit of time to play with these pieces, theorize some dates and schedules. Let's first get ourselves into the mindset. So here's a comparison between WoW expansions since adopting the season philosophy. Right now we're on track for seasons 1 and 2 of Dragonflight to be only a little bit longer than Battle for Azeroth's first 2 seasons. We can conclude that so far Dragonflight is more aligned with Battle for Azeroth's vision of cadence as opposed to, say, Shadowlands. If I'm to assume that season 3 of Dragonflight is going to begin after BlizzCon on November 7th, here's how it's going to look like on this chart. And for now we'll let that be the estimated period. Now let's pretend that for the sake of argument that Season 3, that is patch 10.2, 10.2.5, and 10.2.7, assuming that that's all going to be a thing, each last 8 weeks long, or 56 days. That's about the average length of each patch in Dragonflight. If these numbers line up, that's going to put us at April 23rd when Season 3 ends. And I'm being generous, assuming this usual tight schedule. Some folks out there believe that 10.2.7 would emulate the model of Shadowlands, and the Fated Season will happen at that point, where we would get a 10-week season instead of an 8-week patch, and then we would have this pre-expansion period of about 5 weeks, then ta-da, off to wherever 11.0 takes us. However, when we think about Dragonflight, that doesn't seem realistic at all, because that would put us with an expansion launch of like June 11th. That wouldn't just feel very short, but it would also feel very, very rushed. A regular length Season 3 sounds a lot more realistic because, in this model of Dragonflight already being shorter, why rush on top of that? And by the way, I'm going to presume that a schedule like this was planned from the start. 10.2 was always going to be the raid's finale, but not the expansion's finale, which sends the message that maybe these days raids are not the sun that WoW orbits around. But anyway, back to theorizing. I'm going to bank on a 10.2 that covers the threat of Varrock, the placement of the tree, the empowering of the aspects, and the unification of the Dragonflights. It'll be mostly wrapped up in a nice little package, so a full-on season. And we may get a Season 4 that is less hectic than Shadowlands Season 4 and also better planned. I'd like to see, and I can imagine, a patch 10.3 or a Season 4 of Dragonflight that has like the same vibe and intention as a 0.7 patch. Well, let me explain this a little bit more. What I mean is that 10.3 will be like a big lead-up patch that sets the stage for the next expansion, not just season, but expansion. 10.3 could be a shorter 10-week season still, without any 0.5 or 0.7, followed by the 11.0 pre-patch, and then finally whatever the launch date is. A timeline like this would put WoW's next expansion launch on August 5th or 6th in a worldwide release. Now, it's still a tight schedule in an expansion full of tight schedules, and there are immediate bits to point out that I'm sure that some folks wouldn't like. Obviously missing is a whole ass season. No matter how you swing it, Dragonflight is on course to be one of the shorter expansions in WoW's lineup. It kind of tosses out the whole 2-year expansion mandate that the WoW team has spoke about numerous times. One could argue that a shorter expansion means that for dollar for dollar, we're paying more for less. The counter argument would be that, well, a shorter expansion means less bloated time spent spinning our wheels when we could be doing something new and different and fresh. And this Dragonflight schedule, when you look at it, it does trim a lot of fat, especially during the period when there would be an expansion lull, if, of course, this was real. We have almost a full year's worth of history to back up the notion that WoW is trying very, very hard to be on time, regardless of if it's content that we care about. And I should take a minute to talk about what else would be in this theoretical Dragonflight Season 4 to back up this model. Season 4 of Dragonflight should have what Season 4 of Shadowlands did not, and that's an actual story update. Shadowlands Season 4, in so few words, it was just a more exciting lull, where the story itself didn't move forward. We just got a new season of, raids, Mythic Plus, and PvP, while the outdoor world was pretty stagnant outside of a few quests. I'm theorizing here that 10.2 will be the final raid, while the rest of Season 3, as in the 0.5 and 0.7 patches, are going to wrap up the Dragonflight story. Season 4 of Dragonflight could be a transition patch to slide us away from the Dragon Isles and into this period between expansions. We can call it the Dragonflight epilogue, we can call it the next expansion's prologue. But what if, while Big 3 players enjoy their fated raids and their new season and another gladiator mount and so on and so forth, the rest of us get to go to, I don't know, Silithus. Okay, why Why Silithus? Because an obscure gap between expansions is a great chance to address the literal biggest problem that Azeroth has before totally forgetting about it forever. Think of this. Imagine that since the events of Shadowlands and the time skip and Dragonflight, forces on Azeroth have been continuing work on healing the land. It could be that these efforts, I don't know, jostled the sword and caused the events of Dragonflight to start in the first place, but now we're going way out there. So back to Silithus. What if something happened while the deconstruction of the sword was happening? What if the land was so damaged that Silithus ended up collapsing, revealing all sorts of stuff that was buried in the zone, turning it into this fishbowl kind of crater, not unlike Nazjatar? It would be pretty wild, right? Like, it would reveal Karaji structures and tunneling, maybe some of the Titan machinery that's being used to sustain Azeroth, and who knows what. Maybe the partially deconstructed sword is actually a labyrinth filled with demons, and the remnants of the Burning Legion are using the sword's corpse to pour into Azeroth, and now the sword is called Swordghast, and it's full of demons, and it's become this new evergreen feature with this persistent threat of a demon invasion. And what do we get from it? We get demon bikes and Dreadlord cosplay outfits, and obviously I made this up 100%. It just sounded cool. In fact, I shared it a little bit in a tweet. So imagine my surprise when Towley, who's a bigger WoW and variety streamer, when he commented on it real quick. Now, Towley, if you don't know him, regularly, every now and then he'll drop hints / predictions / made up stuff about what's next for the World of Warcraft. It is known that he talks with Blizzard devs, and it is known that he's been wrong when making some of these more outlandish predictions, but I can't help but find it a little curious that he went back into some random tweet that I made. Even Bellular found it curious enough to mention as well.
Now, Soul said at some point in 11.0, the sword trademark is finally addressed, and its deconstruction causes a structural collapse of Silithus, revealing a semi-underground zone of Titan Courage structures, ruins, and 3 question marks. There are 3 question marks underneath the earth, to which Towley says, I mean, and not to just do the normal ... He in fact does 4 dots.
That's an ellipses plus.
An ellipses plus, what could that mean?
So are we close to something? No, absolutely not. But I'm trying to introduce ideas that people have been asking for years, and that's to not have a lull. A Fated Season nails it for Big 3 players, so the way I see it, Shadowlands got us almost halfway there. We just have a little bit to go. Meanwhile, there are smaller patches and possibly zone content to slide the story into what is next. And it doesn't have to be Silithus, it doesn't have to be this huge, massive zone update, but perhaps just some new quest lines and events in existing zones, story updates to the Azeroth that we haven't seen all that much of since the Battle for Azeroth. And the most important bit of all this is that this entire thing is planned. It's being clearly demonstrated that the WoW team can lay out content and activities with deliberate timelines. Before Shadowlands, it's been kind of a panic at the end of a final tier, right? And the WoW team relied on good faith to keep us entertained while waiting, like a half a year or even longer for the next expansion update. Now that good faith, it ain't what it used to be. So I'm looking forward to their next roadmap to be hopefully revealed by BlizzCon. And in recent news, some company called Shabox, they finalized their deal of buying Activision Blizzard for about $69 billion. Nice! It was a years-long roller coaster of wheeling and dealing, of lawsuits and emails and console war fanboys, my dudes. You thought WoW infighting was a thing? While I'd love to talk about the implications for Blizzard and celebrate Bobby Kotick's leaving at the end of the year, which is happening, and the hopes and worries of what Microsoft will do with Blizzard's franchises, we're just here to talk about WoW. Pictures are floating around about the Xbox Game Pass and future interactions with Activision Blizzard games that are in the works. And we're going to hear about that stuff in probably a few months, most likely after Bobby Kotick's gone, as well as most of the C-suite executives. That's kind of a usual thing in a big buyout like this. To talk about how Microsoft is going to affect World of Warcraft development, it's a lot more murky. It's not so different from talking about Activision's nebulous influence on Blizzard games, so I'm not going to go there, at least for now. So our last discussions today are going to be about the possible relationship between World of Warcraft and the Xbox Game Pass. What are the possibilities? What are the challenges, the contradictions? Could there be benefits for us as consumers? It's really easy to fall down the rabbit hole, so I'm going to do my best to stay, kind of on the surface with this conversation. So let's start with, what is the Xbox Game Pass, in case you didn't know? It's a multi-tiered subscription service for PC games, console games, or both. It just depends on the tier that you get. Using PC as an example, for $10 a month, I can download and play whatever games are included in the Game Pass catalog at no additional cost. Think of streaming services like Netflix. Titles come and go, but while they're here, play as much as you like. You also get discounts if you want to buy the game outright, purchase DLC, and so on and so forth. And I gotta say, $10 a month ain't bad. Playing one PC game a month is a really good value. So how can World of Warcraft fit into this model? It's actually kind of easy, actually, but first, let's assume that there's going to be an audience who is not interested in anything Xbox. Like, I just play WoW, nothing else matters, I shouldn't feel forced to buy this additional subscription to play the game, right? And yeah, you shouldn't have to, that'd be hella dumb. I predict that someone can be absolutely blind to the Microsoft buyout and not notice a thing happening to their favorite game, because if it ain't broke, why fix it? But let's say you're already a Game Pass subscriber, or you're on the fence, and you also play the World of Warcraft, or maybe the other way around. Wouldn't it be cool to have a benefit since it's all going to be like the same company? Yeah, sure. So here are a few possible discounts and perks that the bean counters can play with. Let's say you can link your Microsoft and Battle.net accounts together. It's not unheard of, we can do this with other services like Google. So now, if you're subscribed to the World of Warcraft and you're a Game Pass subscriber, you're going to get the following benefits. First, you're going to get a passive discount to your subscription while being a Game Pass subscriber. So instead of $15 a month, it's going to be $13 a month. There's no prepaid bundle needed, it's just cheaper. It's going to be like you're always subscribed to one of those 6-month or 12-month subscription plans with World of Warcraft. So while we're at it, Game Pass users should also automatically get the benefits of the special promotional mounts. It seems like a no-brainer. It'd be an easy win. Now, can WoW token users get the same benefits? Probably not. The token doesn't work like that anyway. But there's more to talk about. Let's say that there's a new expansion announced with the regular, the heroic, and the mythic versions. I think it'd be very beneficial to give a pretty good discount for the expansion when it's out day one. Maybe even go as far as to make the regular edition free for Game Pass users. That would get tons of people to try out WoW's newest thing as soon as it launches because, hey, why not? It doesn't cost me anything extra aside from that and the sub cost. Now, like I said, it's probably going to be months before we learn any new information, but until then, I want to hear from you, and that's the show. A few years ago, Activision Blizzard, was taking the beating of its corporate life, and it was well deserved. There were lawsuits, there were bad actors, there was all this abhorrent behavior, and WoW, for many, was a pretty big disappointment. Now, since then, there's been all sorts of crazy stuff. Nothing perfect, but we've had, game announcements, we've had the shuffling of leadership here and there, we've had, new games being, announced and launching, and the initial buyout announcement from Microsoft, it still turned out to be a heck of a jaw-dropper. Dragonflight launched with mixed, but what I'm going to say is a mostly positive reception. It's a reflection of lessons learned and new philosophies. In less than a month, BlizzCon is going to happen, and the company is going to lay it bare for the first time since we learned about Shadowlands, and so much has happened, not just to Blizzard, but to our own lives, to the whole world, to events that are unfolding that are so much bigger than the games that we use to escape from those harsh realities. How will Blizzard, how will they present themselves? And how will we receive them? The past few years have taught me a lot, including to not feel all weighed down, expecting the worstest outcomes. I learned that, at least for me, that being a cynic doesn't shield me from being let down because I'm instead just living in that state of disappointment and the relief of being right. Does that really make me feel better? Not really. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot has happened in the past few years. Sometimes crap happened. Tragedy, a missed opportunity, disappointment. Tomorrow could be that. But tomorrow could be kind of cool too. Tomorrow could be a chance to take a shot at something. It could be extra fries in your order. It could be a new mount that drops. Tomorrow's can be exciting to look forward to. And I want to try to do my best to remind you of that all the time. And I hope to see you tomorrow. So let's thank our wonderful community over on Twitch and Patreon for being what makes this channel possible. And to you, viewer, thank you for indulging in my moments of platitude. You made it to the end. Now, like the video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and I'll catch you later. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.